Let me just take you through the one essay that I found the least convincing, and that's Novenson's essay on who says justification from works of the law. Now, this is where Novenson argues that no Jew or no Jewish Christian would even say that justification came from works of the law or from works of the Torah. Okay, I'm going to make law and Torah interchangeable terms. For Novenson, such an expression, justification by works from the Torah, that's Paul's own idiom, okay? That's Paul's own construction of a term for people who reject his view that Christ-believing Gentiles should not be circumcised. So on Novenson's account, Paul's polemic against justification from works of the law is either a kind of a straw man argument, or it's an entirely invented counter-accusation that he imputes to his critics and detractors. For Novenson, justification from works of the law, he says, is not any pre-existing form of piety in the Jewish world. It is a strategy for not buying what Paul is selling. In other words, justification from works of the law is Paul's own construal of anti-Paulinist views. In other words, he says it's Paul's own polemical invention. Now, what do we say to that? Now, to be fair, I think Novenson makes a very, very good point that Pauline interpreters have a terrible habit of saying, works from the law is Paul's negative evaluation of some aspect of Jewish piety. They then rebrand that as something like legalism, synergism, national righteousness, or calculations of human worth, and they then proceed to try and find that piety somewhere, anywhere, maybe in the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, in Philo or rabbinic literature. And I think Novenson is right on the money. That is a habit that scholars do. And this is when it comes to trying to find the phrase works of the law in other literature, it's very few and far between, and the only place where you really get it is in a particular text, a document, a letter in fact from the Dead Sea Scrolls called 4Q MMT. Now this is one of the few places where the phrase works of the law does appear. But even though that phrase is used, it's not used in the sense of legalistic deeds, as is often said in the Protestant tradition, nor is it the boundary markers of Judaism, which was often argued in the new perspective of Paul. Rather, it seems to denote the Qumranite sectarian view of how to obey the law, in particular the annual calendar and the way you run the temple with the various sacrifices. These works are not related to the topic that Paul is engaged in, which is about, do Gentiles have to become Jews in order to become Christ followers? But they don't deal with that topic at all in 4Q MMT. No, it really concerns the totality of the Torah, everything which is good and right. So that means that 4QQMT's relevance to Paul's own statements about works of the law is oblique at best, rather than exhibit A of what Paul is precisely opposing. So I think Novenson is right on that score. Be that as it may, I would still maintain that justification or righteousness from works of the Torah does not merely emerge from the quest for anti-Pauline parallels in some body of Jewish literature, nor does it emerge from Paul's argumentative rhetoric or the way he handles Habakkuk 2:4 and Genesis 15:6 and talk about the opposite of them. I think justification from works of the law is a way of summarizing some of the religious, ethnic, social situations that Paul himself was confronting. Now, it's true, I don't know whether there was any person who went to Syrian Antioch or Pisidian Antioch in Galatia or into Philippi, who entered a house church and said, don't be a risk or a bore, justification is not by faith but by works of the law. I don't necessarily think there was anyone going around doing that. So in that sense, you could say Novenson is right. And I would also acknowledge that